When God makes a promise to us, again, when we let it be bigger than ourselves, well, I'm going to have this great house, or I'm going to have, okay, that's awesome. Praise God. It's bigger when it's about legacy, when it's about God's kingdom advancing through us. And he says, I'm going to use you to do this. I'll keep you for the sake of accomplishing that. Don't you worry. That's God's kindness. Man, what about the kindness of the Lord?
Today's podcast is a special one because we're going to talk about how God invades in the midst of our mundane days and changes our life with his desire to see and to answer from heaven. Wow, it's always such a joy to do these podcasts, not only because I get to hang out with you, but because I also get to hang out with some of my dearest friends on the planet, Nathan Smith.
Man.
Thank you so much. Dude, you're no stranger to our podcast.
Love it.
You did them with me before we did video podcasts.
That's true.
So now people are both listening and watching. They get to see your beautiful face.
And I'd like to apologize in advance for that.
Dude, it's the best. It's
the best. Man, you're great.
Just thanks for hanging with us. This podcast is Genesis 28:10 to 32:3. Obviously, Jewish people around the world are reading these scriptures in their synagogues. And as you know, we just want to unpack what these scriptures are and make them relevant for today. And I'm just super blessed that you're here.
Oh, it's a privilege.
Because this portion in Hebrew is called vayetse.
Yeah.
And vayetse really comes from the first few words, then Jacob departed. He's on his way.
Yeah.
Well, tell me what's going on right now.
Yeah, so obviously, in previous episodes and just reading through the Torah, there's been the whole Jacob and his brother having the showdown. There's the deception. There's his mother encouraging him. And so now he has fled from all of that and he's on his way. And he went out, vayetse, right?
Vayetse.
And he went out, Jacob. So that's where we are, yeah.
So he went out. I know we didn't pre-plan this.
Sure.
But it's so interesting that in the lives of these patriarchs, there's a going out.
Yes.
Like Abraham went to a land, he went out without knowing where he was going.
He did not know, right.
And maybe we could just focus in on that just for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
That in our walks with the Lord, and there are some people that they've got their 5-year plan, man. They know where they're going to be the next minute.
Which is so impressive. I don't know how you do that. But
I know.
Yeah.
But living the life of faith sometimes requires us to go really without that 5-year plan and just say, okay, God's calling me. And when I look at these first few verses, it says, verse 10 of chapter 28, then Jacob departed from Beersheba and went toward Haran because he was told, go towards Haran.
Right.
And then this is really crazy. We know that Jacob's about to have this dream, and I want you to talk about that. But verse 11 says he came to a certain place and spent the night there. Now, it doesn't say he came to the name of the place.
Yeah.
It's the Bible to me, it's almost like it's alluding to the fact that this place was made, it wasn't nameless, but it's nameless here.
Kind of nondescript. Yeah, not noteworthy. It's just where he is.
And something stupendous happens.
Oh, absolutely.
As he's here, which really, bro, makes me kind of excited to think that as we're following the Lord, there are going to be these nondescript places that many of us might actually even overlook.
Absolutely.
But where God wants to meet with us.
Well, and if you think, and as we progress in the story, Jacob's not expecting anything dynamic, right? And I think that's where so many of us are. We're trying to just daily faithfulness, just put one foot in front of the other, which can feel very uninspiring, not exciting, not a lot of Instagram posts on, going back to work today, because there's just that daily attitude, daily expectation of, well, I'm just trying to stay in it. And yet God will break into those daily moments. And I think that's what happens in Jacob's life.
Which is kind of crazy. And I know we're not talking about Moses. That's a future podcast. But think of what Moses was doing. He's on the backside of the desert, hidden in the 40th year. So now he's 80, tending sheep with his little staff, doing the mundane.
The mundane.
And he comes to a certain place.
Yeah.
a certain place. And there's a bush that's burning, and God commissions him ultimately for his call. So let's not look lightly at certain places. And let's really say, Lord, in the midst of my certain places, in the midst of my seemingly mundane life today, you can speak to me, which he actually does right here.
Yeah, that happens. And I think, Scott, that's an encouragement, even as we're just starting into this portion, right? So many people lose heart along the way because it's not dynamic and it's not exciting. And, it's way more fun to celebrate the new and exciting. Yeah. Always. You get a new car, you get a new whatever. It's like, oh, check this out. Not many people are talking about, 14 years I've been driving the same, whatever. It's not as exciting, but there is something in the consistency. Gosh. I've heard it said before, life with God is a series of faithful days. Yeah. Faithful, faithful, faithful. And then boom, bonus, right? Yeah. He breaks into that mundane, that what can seem to be boring, mundane. And this happens in Jacob's life, and it alters his destiny. Yeah. It truly does.
Let's talk about it. Go ahead, man.
Yeah. So if you're looking here, it says that he had a dream, right? In verse 12. Yep. And behold, a ladder was set on earth with its top reaching to heaven. Behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending
Genesis
on it.
28:12. Yep.
Yeah. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your descendants. So he gets a rock, which that's a questionable, behavior already, to lay your head on the rock. Somehow that was more comfortable than the ground. But maybe he just, he had little sleep things. So he gets a rock, puts it under his head, falls asleep, and God encounters him in this dream. And it's not just some happenstance small thing. This is a revelatory theophany, God bringing himself to be known and reaffirming a promise. This is incredible. And this goes on to mark his entire life. Yeah. On the way. Yeah. And he went out.
On the way.
Right? He's not even where he's going ultimately. Right. And yet God breaks into it and it changes everything.
Bro, you just said this, it's not even ultimately where he was going.
Right.
That's really powerful. Yeah. It's really powerful. When God intersects, he says, the land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. You weren't with me on the last podcast, but I was just talking about the issue of being a sojourner. Okay. The issue of being an alien and a stranger and a foreigner, even in the land of promise. Wow. This wasn't Jacob's yet. Right. It wasn't Israel's yet. It wasn't. It was in the spirit, because God said to Abraham, this land,
this is going to be yours. That's right.
And Jacob is actually resting in a place along the way. And God says, okay, this is my promise. It's not yours now physically, but it's yours. Yeah. And just bro, I've got some unfulfilled dreams in my life. Yeah. And for the Lord to reiterate, don't let go of those. Right. Because you might not be seeing the actual fulfillment of that in your life right now. Yes. And I know you do too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think people listening and watching today, I think everyone has things that are yet fulfilled. And again, it's just so easy to lose heart in it. Yeah. But for the Lord to break in and to say, hey, I haven't forgotten. Yeah. I have not. It doesn't matter what it looks like. I have not forgotten. It's good. Even though you're on your way, haven't fully realized what you're trying to accomplish, I haven't forgotten. And I think that might be an encouraging word to someone today already.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Absolutely. Let's continue reading on. Let's go to verse 14. Yeah. Your descendants, by the way, in one of the previous podcasts, we talked about that God is a God of genealogies.
Absolutely.
That he's a generational. He's not the God of Abraham. Right. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Absolutely.
And that when God sees us, he doesn't want to just fulfill his promise so that you can be blessed, but so that it's your children and your children. A righteous man leaves an inheritance, not just for his children, right? His children's children. Yeah. That your kids and your grandkids are going to be fulfilling the very thing that God promised. And look at this, your descendants also will be like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. In you and your descendants and your families, all the earth shall be blessed. I just want to pause here for 1 second. This is very similar to what the Lord spoke to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12.
Absolutely.
Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Let's just take just a short minute and talk about the family of Israel. You know, Jacob's name hasn't been changed yet to Israel, but God chose one family, not because he loved them more, but because he wanted the entire earth to be blessed, Jew and Gentile, that God already was seeing in this family the potential for the salvation of the nations.
Right. Wow.
I'm just shocked and blessed that God's not just thinking about my well-being, he's thinking about the well-being of my kids.
Absolutely. And that, again, it's that generational God. It's one generation shouts to the next, right? The faithfulness of the Lord. And that inheritance that you talk about, a lot of times in Western culture, we can think leaving an inheritance for our children's children is money or resources.
Yeah.
And it can be those things.
Yeah.
But a legacy of faith, right?
Come on.
A legacy of faith that says God was faithful to Abraham, he was faithful to Isaac, he was faithful to Jacob, he'll be faithful to you.
Amen.
To be able to proclaim that, even when the psalmist says, from one generation to the next. And God reiterating that, God reminding Jacob that that's what he's going to do. I promised this to Abraham, but I'm just letting you know I haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
And for those that are today in that grind of, I really thought it was going to look different. I really feel like God told me, don't let go.
Yeah.
God's not done. We measure things in days. He measures things sometimes in years and decades.
Yeah.
So we just have to trust his leadership.
That's great. I got one more thing, and then I want to turn it over to you. Immediately after that, he says, behold, I am with you and I will keep you. I am with you and I will keep you. You know, if there's ever a time where we need to really have the revelation of God keeping us, it's in a situation where we wonder whether he will.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I will keep you. And I know we chatted just briefly about this word keep. There's a Hebrew word. Can you just talk about it really quickly?
Yeah, I'm certainly no scholar, but the bit of Hebrew I do know, shamar, is the word to keep. It also means to guard. So when we think of keeping, like if I keep this jar, that's one thing, but at the same idea, I'm guarding and protecting it, right?
Wow.
So when you think about the Aaronic blessing number 6, right? And God will bless you and keep you. Vayishmarecha, shamar. And he will guard you. He will keep you. He'll protect you. He'll secure you. And that God is making it, he's re-upping. Again, he's not making it for the first time. He is re-upping and reiterating. No, I'm going to bring about this thing. Not that you're going to bring it about. God, I'm going to bring it about. But I will keep and guard you in the process.
This is wild because Jacob's really kind of like third generation. You've got Abraham, you got Isaac, you got Jacob.
Right.
God never told Abraham he was going to keep him.
Come on.
Now, obviously he was going to keep him, but here now you're 3 generations down.
Right. Wow.
And it's like, the Lord is saying, okay, you don't see the fruition yet, but I'm going to keep you. He that keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is your keeper. The shade upon your right hand. The sun's not going to smite you by day, nor the moon by night.
Come on.
If God is going to say he's going to keep you, that must insinuate that there's going to be plenty of thoughts that come into our mind.
Absolutely.
That is like, is the Lord going to keep me?
You think about his situation, he's already got a family breakdown going on between he and his brother and the deception and his mom and everything else. So there's already a lack of certainty in his spirit of there's relational dynamics that are out of whack and where am I going and what's going to happen? And God is saying in the midst of all that, obviously he's a little concerned. We read later, he's concerned about his brother's disposition towards him, right? And he's like, hey, I'm not going to let anybody harm you. He didn't even say that he agreed with everything that he had done. God just says, I'm going to keep you because there's a promise that has to be fulfilled. I just want you to know I'm all in on that promise and I've got you. And man, that is when God makes a promise to us, again, when we let it be bigger than ourselves, well, I'm going to have this great house or I'm going to have, okay, that's awesome. Praise God. It's bigger when it's about legacy, when it's about God's kingdom advancing through us. And he says, I'm going to use you to do this. I'll keep you for the sake of accomplishing that. Don't you worry. That's God's kindness. Man, what about the kindness of the Lord? Reassuring Jacob in the midst of all the family drama Just want you to know, I'm going to guard and keep you. Yeah. I've got something I'm going to produce. I love that.
I love it too, bro. And I'm thinking of families right now that are really going through it. I've just got a prayer request this morning from someone who says, listen, you really need to pray for my family.
Wow.
And then to know that God says, I will keep you. You know, friends, I just really want to encourage you. Whatever it is that you're walking through, and some of you I think are listening or watching that maybe even have serious family fractures, like this one perhaps, where you think, man, this situation's impossible. The Lord will keep you, and He's going to be faithful to His promises. Nathan, there's something interesting about this story, because it says that Jacob, in verse 12, just backing up a little bit, he said, and behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on this ladder. Kind of reminds me of another story. And since your name is Nathan or Nathaniel, maybe you can just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, it's so fun to think about. So John chapter 1 in the New Testament, we see the picture of Jesus calling the disciples, but then there's a specific encounter when he sees Nathanael sitting under the fig tree, right? And if you remember the passage, it's John 1, it's in the 50s, late 40s, 50s of that chapter. Jesus says, I saw you under the fig tree. And then Nathanael basically is like, wow, you must be the rabbi, the Son of God. Because Jesus initially says, here comes a man in whom there is no guile, right? There's a guiltless man.
Yeah.
And he's like, have we met before? I'm paraphrasing. Nathanael's like, have we met before? He's like, no, I saw you under the fig tree. And then Nathanael's response is, wow, you must be the Messiah. And Jesus' response to that is, oh, you think I'm, again, paraphrasing, you think I'm the Messiah because I saw you under the fig tree. I'm telling you, you're going to see the angels of God. You're going to see the Son of Man ascending and descending. Jesus is referencing this exact passage of Scripture in this Torah portion, and many scholars, postulate, we can't say for sure, but many scholars point to the fact it's very likely when someone would go sit under their fig tree, sometimes that was a picture of going and studying the Scriptures. You would sit under your own fig tree and you would study the Torah. And it's possible Nathanael was reading this passage, maybe even this portion, right? Where he's contemplating, what does this mean? That God would show up and the angels would ascend and descend. Jesus says, I saw you there. Not only did I see you there, you're going to see the very thing you were reading about and didn't understand, because I'm Him. Amazing. I am the one that's ascending and descending, bridging that gap between God and man. And again, it's just whether that's accurate or not, the beautiful thing is Jesus is breaking into His day and saying, I just want you to know, I see you. I'm for you. I'm not against you. Just like He did for Jacob, and really just like He's doing for people today.
I love that, bro. We've only got a couple minutes left. And I'd love for you to bring this to a close. Just even as we've been sitting here, though, I got to tell you, man, it's like super encouraging to me that the Lord sees.
Yes.
He sees. We might think we're invisible to others, but God sees, and He wants to meet us where we're at. Some of these certain places, nondescript places, He sees. He sees Moses on the backside of the desert. Yeah. He sees Jacob as he's fleeing for his life. He sees Nathanael as he's under the fig tree. And bro, anything that's on your heart, let's just hit it and then close.
Well, ultimately, if we keep reading just in this intro part of the portion, Jacob lands with, God is here. God is here. It was more than just a pizza dream. It was more than, he understands. No, this was not some neat little encounter. No, God is here, so much so that He calls the place Bethel, right? Bait El, the house of God, Bethel. And he makes a proclamation about that place. And I just think, for those of us where we're needing God to break into our day, into the mundane, into we're not quite where we hope to be yet, the Lord will break in, but we have to recognize, man, that place of communion with Him, He wants to dwell with us wherever we are if we'll invite Him in.
I love it.
And for Nathanael, it was under a fig tree and the Lord met him. Yeah. For Jacob, it's on the way and he lays down and puts his head on a rock and God meets him. And for people that are watching or listening today, God is not aloof. He's not distant, right? Even as Paul said, some of you think he's far off. He's not far off. And so we can invite him in and he will dwell with us. Just the beautiful thing. We just finished the feasts, and tabernacles and everything else just happened last week. God's desire is to dwell with us.
Yeah.
And if we will make a space for him, just quiet ourselves before him, he'll break in and encourage us.
I love that. Yeah. Tabernacles was last week. We're actually filming this right after that. Yeah. This is going to air in about 5 or 6 weeks after Tabernacles, but we're never supposed to forget Tabernacles. We're never supposed to forget that even as God took care of his children in the wilderness, he saw them.
He saw them.
And he sees us as well.
He sees us.
Dude, you're the best. Thank you, Nathan. Oh. You're awesome. And thank you, friends, for watching. If today has been a blessing to you, please, please, please feel free to share this. Share the audio version. Share the video version. If you've not downloaded our app yet, please go to the App Store, download Together for Israel app. All of these podcasts are on there. And it's a joy every week to come to you. Thank you for inviting us in. May the Lord bless you, and be assured that God sees you today.